The early hours of August 2nd, 2015, precisely at 3 a.m., an urgent call was made to 911. An older gentleman reported in a frantic tone that his son-in-law, Jason Corbett, had assaulted his daughter, Molly. To protect her, Tom intervened and struck Jason on the head with a baseball bat. He mentioned Jason was bleeding heavily and might already be deceased. He urgently requested an ambulance to their location. Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old businessman from Limerick, Ireland, was known for his cheerful and kind personality. He had a twin brother named Wayne and a sister named Tracy. In February 2003, at the age of 27, Jason married Margaret Fitzpatrick. They soon welcomed a son named Jack and a daughter named Sarah. Their family life appeared idyllic in Ireland until tragedy struck. In February 2006, not long after Sarah's birth, Margaret experienced a severe asthma attack in the middle of the night. She woke Jason up, struggling to breathe. Despite Jason's efforts to help with medication and an inhaler, her condition deteriorated. In desperation, he called for an ambulance. However, Margaret sadly passed away en route to the hospital. At just 30 years old and serving as the director of a small packaging company in Ireland, Jason was left to raise their children, his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter, alone. His friends noted his profound sadness and struggle following this loss. A year after Margaret's passing, Jason sought help with childcare and housekeeping duties. This led him to hire Molly Martins, a 25-year-old American woman. Molly arrived in Ireland from the United States in March 2008. A longtime friend of Jason's met her at the airport, but immediately harbored reservations about her suitability for the role of nanny and housekeeper. Molly appeared much younger than her age suggested and had a rather flamboyant style, sporting a bright coat with a fur collar, along with cowboy boots and heavy makeup. To this friend, she seemed more like someone out of theater than fitting for such significant responsibilities. Molly Martins grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. She left Clemson University and decided to start afresh in Ireland. Molly quickly formed a strong bond with Jason's son and daughter, showing tenderness and care. Soon, Jason's close friends noticed a change. He was gradually healing after the loss of his first wife, appearing more lively and engaged. Feelings blossomed between Jason and Molly, leading to a romantic. The couple, along with Jack and Sarah, enjoyed a vacation together. They had a wonderful time, growing closer while planning their future life. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason invited Molly to a cafe, where he proposed with a ring. Overjoyed, Molly began planning their wedding in America. She persuaded Jason to move to her home country, and he agreed. In 2011, Jason sold his house and relocated his job to the United States. The family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina, where Jason and Molly married in a ceremony attended by many relatives and friends from both America and Ireland. After their marriage, Molly worked as a swimming instructor, but mainly focused on caring for Jack and Sarah. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. Meanwhile, Jason held a managerial position in the United States. Initially happy, their marital relationship eventually began to deteriorate. This growing tension peaked on August 1st, 2015, when Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited the Corbett family's home at around 11 p.m. Jason welcomed them in the driveway and helped with their luggage. Tom brought a baseball bat as a gift for Jack, Jason's son, who was out at a party with friends at the time. That evening, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had dinner together. They opted for pizza. Jack returned home close to midnight. However, Tom decided not to give him the baseball bat at such an hour, but intended to present it later instead. The following morning, after 11 p.m., the family retired for the night. Molly and Jason slept in the master bedroom on the first floor with the children, Jack and Sarah, in adjacent rooms. Molly's parents were accommodated in the guest room on the second floor. In the early of August 2nd, around 3 a.m., Tom Martins called 911. He claimed that his son-in-law, Jason, had attacked Molly and that he had struck Jason with a baseball bat in response. Tom urgently requested assistance, unsure of Jason's condition, who lay unconscious and bleeding. The 911 guided Tom and Molly through cardiopulmonary resuscitation procedures in an effort to revive Jason before medical help arrived. When police and ambulance services arrived 10 minutes later, they found Molly outside near a car appearing distraught and in shock, but without actual tears. Inside, they discovered the lifeless body of 39-year-old Jason Corbett in the main bedroom. Blood spattered across the bed, walls, and floor. Both Tom's and Molly's clothing bore bloodstains while blood marked Jason's body. Near Jason lay a baseball bat and a large cobblestone, both with traces of blood, as well as an overturned lamp. Throughout this ordeal, Jack and Sarah remained asleep in their rooms. Tom and Molly did not deny their involvement in Jason's death, asserting it was self-defense. They were taken to the station for questioning. At the police station, 66-year-old Tom Martins, an FBI veteran with 30 years of experience, stated that his son-in-law was insane and constantly tormented his daughter. According to Tom, Jason was drunk that evening. Everyone went to bed, but Tom woke up at night because he heard screams and loud voices on the first floor of the house. He jumped out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and ran downstairs. Tom entered the main bedroom and saw Jason holding Molly by the throat with both hands. He yelled at Jason to let her go, to which Jason turned to him and said he would kill her. Tom claimed his protective instincts kicked in instantly, so he hit Jason with the baseball bat, but noted that their forces were unequal. Jason didn't appear to feel the blow as he tried to drag Molly into the bathroom and shut the door. However, Tom intervened. Jason pushed the elderly man, making him fall and causing his glasses to fly off. Tom confessed that at that moment he believed he was going to be. Jason spotted the bat on the floor and reached for it. At that point, Molly grabbed a stone and shouted, "Don't touch my dad." Then, she struck her husband on the head with all her might. Following that, Tom seized the baseball bat and began hitting Jason until he fell to the floor. During questioning, 32-year-old Molly Corbett recounted the same story to investigators. She explained that her daughter Sarah woke up during the night screaming from night terrors. This woke Jason, who became very angry and lashed out at his wife. He started strangling her, threatening to kill her. Her father came to Molly's aid. Molly admitted hitting her husband on the head with a heavy stone to save her father. When asked where she got the stone, Molly replied that it had been on her bedside table. They had planned to paint cobblestones with their children for decorating flower beds with colorful stones. The woman couldn't recall how many times she hit her husband. She only mentioned it was a desperate fight for survival. Midway through the interrogation, Molly expressed enduring pain from being choked by her husband. Investigators photographed her neck, which bore a red mark in its center. Later, police compared these photos with those taken during her arrest and found no red marks on Molly's neck at detention time. She confessed that while there had been a fight between herself and her husband the day before the tragedy, it was then when Jason grabbed her by the arms and neck. Throughout questioning, she frequently complained of throat pain. Both Tom and Molly claimed in unison that Jason Corbett had been treating his wife brutally. However, his family provided conflicting accounts. Tracy Lynch, Jason Corbett's sister, shared insights about what she described as an unusual relationship between them. Dynamics observed during Jason's wedding to Molly indicated Molly exerted considerable control over Jason, often becoming upset if things didn't align with her expectations. Her reluctance to interact with Jason's visiting relatives raised further concerns. Additional alarm was added by the revelation of one of Molly's friends. This friend stated that Molly told everyone she had been friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until Margaret died of cancer. This contradicted family reports, as everyone knew she had died of an asthma attack. Despite these red flags and attempts by Jason's family and friends to dissuade him from marrying Molly due to her odd behavior, the wedding proceeded. This event marked the beginning of a complicated and troubled union. Initially, Molly and Jason Corbett's marriage appeared harmonious. Molly formed a close bond with Jason's children, Jack and Sarah, treating them as her own. However, as their first wedding anniversary approached in 2012, Jason expressed disclosure, marked the beginning of a decline in the couple's relationship. Despite Jack and Sarah referring to Molly as their mother, Jason resisted Molly's intentions to legally adopt them. He wanted to preserve the memory of their biological mother. During this period, Molly's behavior started to change noticeably. Jason grew increasingly concerned about her mental well-being, suspecting she might have a psychological disorder. He observed a stark contrast between her initially sweet demeanor and subsequent behavior, which he perceived as more manipulative and controlling. Molly began isolating Jason from his family, often curtailing his phone conversations with them to mere seconds. Following the untimely death of his first wife, Jason Corbett designated his sister Tracy Lynch as the legal guardian for his Jack and Sarah. In the event of his own demise, Tracy was well aware that if something to Jason, Molly would strongly contest the custody of the children. When Jason passed away, Tracy promptly traveled to North Carolina to file for custody, anticipating a legal battle with Molly, who also sought custody rights. During their strained marriage, Molly had sought legal counsel to understand her rights over Jason's children in the event of the divorce. Her lawyer advised her to document their disputes and accumulate incriminating evidence against Jason. Consequently, Molly began secretly recording their conversations. In these recordings, Molly appeared disengaged, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions while he escalated his voice. A close friend of Molly's disclosed that although Molly rarely discussed her marital issues, she began to express negative sentiments about Jason following his death. Molly confided in her friend that Jason was domineering and abusive. She accused him of forcing her into intimate acts, verbally abusing her, and progressively worsening in his treatment towards her. Despite these allegations, Molly did not report these incidents to the authorities. For days after Jason Corbett's tragic demise, his children Jack and Sarah, aged 10 and 8, were interviewed by a child welfare professional. In this interview, they shared observations about the relationship between their parents. Notably, they mentioned their mother Molly being cautious about not waking their father Jason, fearing it might anger him. Jack specifically talked about a cobblestone kept on the bedside table. He clarified that they had brought the stone inside due to rain, intending to decorate it later. Regarding their parents' interactions, both Jack and Sarah described incidents where they witnessed physical altercations initiated by their father against Molly. They recounted occasions where Jason physically assaulted Molly, including hitting and pushing her, and frequently snapping at her over minor issues. Subsequent to these revelations, Jack and Sarah were temporarily placed under the care of their biological relatives. Aunt Tracy Lynch, who had traveled from Ireland, stayed in a North Carolina hotel during the unfolding custody battle. By the time Jason Corbett's autopsy was completed, it revealed the grim details of his demise. The cause of death was a traumatic brain injury. Jason had suffered approximately 12 strikes to the head with both a baseball bat and a brick. These blows were concentrated on the same area, leading to his scalp being severely torn from his skull and his skull itself being fractured. Notably, the medical examiner concluded that at least one of these strikes was inflicted after Jason had already passed away. The toxicology report provided additional insights. It indicated that Jason's blood contained slightly higher than normal levels of alcohol. Additionally, traces of trazodone, an antidepressant medication commonly prescribed for insomnia, were also found in his system. Jason Corbett was laid to rest in his hometown Limerick, Ireland, alongside his first wife, Margaret. Their shared tombstone is adorned with a wedding photograph, serving as a poignant reminder of their lives and the bond they shared. 16 days after Jason Corbett's passing, his sister Tracy Lynch took his children Jack and Sarah to Ireland, separating them from their stepmother Molly. Molly was left in a state of shock and despair upon discovering that Jack and Sarah had been taken to another country. She attempted to reach out to them through phone calls and social media posts, hoping these messages would somehow reach the children. Meanwhile, Molly and Tom consistently maintained that their actions against Jason were in self-defense. However, the investigation into Jason's death was ongoing. Tracy Lynch believed in a different motive. She speculated that Molly was aware of Jason's plans to leave her and take their children with him. Tracy surmised that on the night of the incident, Jason had informed Molly of his decision. Out of fear and loneliness, Molly reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah received psychological support and gradually adapted to their new environment. 9 months after their father's tragic demise, they admitted they had been coerced into lying about the alleged domestic violence at home. They revealed that Molly had manipulated them into fabricating stories about their father's behavior, threatening them with the loss of contact with her if they refused to comply. Contrary to their earlier statements, the children clarified that their father had never been abusive toward Molly. During the course of the inquiry, investigators discovered Molly Corbett's past connection with her ex-partner, Keith Megan. He provided several insightful details regarding her earlier life. Keith and Molly initially connected through a dating website, quickly falling for each other at their first meeting. They moved in together just 6 weeks later. Keith acknowledged Molly's independent spirit, jovial nature, and unique personality. However, she eventually disclosed her struggle with bipolar disorder to him. Keith wasn't overly worried about this revelation since Molly was on medication and generally stable, except for occasional shifts in behavior when she missed her doses. She wasn't violent or prone to outbursts, but would insist on not letting Keith leave during disputes. Molly often spent extended periods in the bathtub, then sat on the cold floor weeping. Despite these challenges, they continued their lives together without plans for children. Molly informed Keith she was on contraceptives, but unexpectedly declared they were expecting a child. At this point, Keith, the family's sole earner, faced financial strain and felt unprepared for parenthood. His discovery of an unopened pack of contraceptives in Molly's wardrobe led him to realize her deceit. Yet Keith, being an honorable man, proposed to Molly, who accepted joyfully. Undeterred by her health issues, she maintained her regimen of antidepressants and other medications, sometimes taking up to 16 pills daily, which caused Keith concern for their unborn child's well-being. Molly once dreamt of losing the baby, and tragically, the following day, the hospital confirmed the fetus's demise. This incident further strained their relationship. Molly plunged into profound mourning and was diagnosed with severe depression, as documented in her medical records. Her parents began supporting her more fervently and, simultaneously, developed a disdainful view of Keith, casting him as the antagonist. In early 2008, Molly informed her fiancé of her plan to go to Europe to find work as a nanny or house assistant. By March, she packed her belongings and left the apartment she had been renting with her fiancé. 10 days later, Molly called Keith to tell him she was in Ireland, had found a job, and everything was fine. From that point on, they never spoke or saw each other again. Keith Megan first heard from a North Carolina detective and subsequent departure to another country. A secret from everyone. And subsequent departure to another country, a secret from everyone. Keith admitted that upon viewing an interview featuring Tom and Molly, in which they portrayed the late Jason Corbett as malevolent and dreadful, he found their story unconvincing and, moreover, perceived their expressions as merely facades. In January 2016, half a year following Jason's demise, Tom and Molly were unexpectedly indicted for second-degree murder. By July 2017, 2 years since the incident, the father and daughter duo faced their trial together. They maintained their stance of having acted in self-defense in Jason's killing. During the trial, Tom Martin claimed his actions were what any true father would do: protect his daughter. He believed it was a life or death situation, and did all he could to safeguard both Molly and himself. Tom confessed he was the one who struck Jason with a bat, ceasing only when he felt sure Jason no longer posed a threat. The prosecution contended in court that the severity of the blows indicated deep-seated animosity. An expert analyzing the bloodstains deduced that some strikes were dealt when Jason's head was 30 to 50 centimeters off the ground, strongly suggesting Tom continued to strike him even when he was down and no threat. Blood stains on Molly's pajama bottom suggested she was close to Jason during these blows. A long, light-colored hair, possibly Molly's, was found in John's hand, but it wasn't tested. The autopsy revealed defensive wounds on John's left hand, but none on his right. This is significant because he might have used his right hand to grab Molly by the throat. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young repeatedly told her to stop, and noted that except for dried blood on her cheek, forehead, and hair, she had no other injuries. Similarly, Tom had no injuries on the front of his shirt, but blood was found on his watch dial and under his fingernails. His glasses remained intact. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also testified. When she arrived at the scene and examined Jason's body, she found his torso already cold with patches of dried blood. This contradicted Molly's claim that they had immediately called 911 after Jason lost consciousness and collapsed. The trial further revealed that Jason Corbett had a life insurance policy, naming Molly as the beneficiary. It was also disclosed that Jason often sent money to Molly's parents during his lifetime. For instance, in 2011, he sent $50,000 to Tom, supposedly for wedding expenses. A neighbor came forward during the trial, recounting how he and Jason spent an evening together drinking beer from about 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. The neighbor described Jason as very relaxed and noted Jason's calm interactions with his in-laws when they arrived at the Corbett residence. He witnessed Tom and his wife arriving with Jason welcoming them and helping carry heavy bags from their car into the house. Finally, a nurse testified about her observations of the couple before this incident occurred. The tragic event unfolded when it was reported that trazodone had been prescribed to Molly a few days before the incident on July 30th, 2015. Jason had visited the hospital 2 weeks prior to his passing, expressing concerns about frequent dizziness, tension, and unprovoked anger. After 9 days filled with witness accounts, debates, and distressing crime scene photographs, the jury reached a verdict in merely 3 hours. Molly Corbett and her father, Tom Martins, were convicted of second-degree murder and received sentences of 20 and 25 years in prison, respectively. Upon hearing the verdict, Molly turned to her mother with regret in her voice stating, "I'm so sorry, but I shouldn't have let him kill me." While it seemed justice had been served for the convicted individuals, the case was far from over. Just an hour after the jury delivered their verdict, a juror disclosed outside the courthouse that discussions about Jason Corbett's case occurred prior to the formal deliberation period. This was a significant breach of legal protocol. In light of this revelation, the defense swiftly submitted a request to overturn the conviction due to juror misconduct. However, this motion was dismissed by the trial court judge. A year later, the defense approached the appellate court, highlighting several investigative errors. One issue raised concerned bloodstains on Tom Martin's shorts. The prosecution had suggested these stains belonged to Jason's blood, implying Tom stood over Jason during the assault, but they were never actually tested. The prosecutor argued it was impractical and unnecessary to test every single blood spot. The defense also underscored initial statements made by Jack and Sarah. They initially claimed their father was abusive towards them, Molly, and expressed fear of him. The defense argued that the siblings' late attractions, were they to lying, were influenced by professionals, suing them to change their testimony. On 4th, 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals determined Tom Martins and Molly Corbett should be granted a new trial. This decision was later upheld by the Supreme Court of North Carolina. Subsequently, both were released on a $200,000 bond. While awaiting the retrial, they were required to hand over their passports and were forbidden from making any contact with Jack and Sarah. Currently, Jason Corbett's case has been moved to Forsyth County, North Carolina, for additional legal proceedings, marking a minor triumph for Tom and Molly. Jason's children, Jack and Sarah, are now residing with their biological aunt in Ireland. Sarah, aged 16, has authored a series of books aimed at helping others deal with the loss of parents. Tracy Lynch, Jason's sister, has also penned a book about her brother during these years of legal battles. She aims to share the kindness and decency of Jason Corbett with the world. A notable excerpt from Tracy's book reads, "The Case of Isabella Rodriguez." Isabella Rodriguez was born in Colombia in 1975 and moved to Florida with her family in the 1990s. They obtained U.S. residency and eventually citizenship in February 2002, when Isabella was 27. She married William Helman, but they divorced in February 2015 after a decade together. Isabella then met Louis Bennett online, and they began a romantic relationship. In February 2016, Isabella and Louis had a daughter named Amelia. 6 months later, they purchased an apartment in Delray Beach, a city on Florida's Atlantic coast. They married the following month, in February 2017. At the time, Isabella worked as a real estate agent and Louis owned a small solar panel company. On April 30th, 2017, Isabella flew to the Caribbean island of St. Martin to meet Louis, leaving their 9-month-old daughter with relatives. They planned to spend a week on the water, returning home to Florida on Louis's sailing catamaran. After stopping in the British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, they arrived in Cuba, where they stayed for a few days. On May 14th, the catamaran set sail from Varadero, Cuba, bound for Florida. Isabella called her sister 3 hours later to say she would be home the next day. At around 1 a.m., Louis sent out a distress signal to the U.S. Coast Guard, reporting that his ship had collided with an unknown object and was sinking. He also reported that his wife, Isabella, was missing. A Coast Guard helicopter crew located Louis in a life raft around 4 a.m. and took him to Key West Island, the southernmost part of Florida. The catamaran was found floating upside down at dawn, but had not yet sunk. During an interview with investigators, Louis explained that he and Isabella took turns keeping watch. At the time of the accident, it was Isabella's turn, and Louis was asleep in his stateroom. He woke up to the sound of the collision and rushed on deck, but couldn't find Isabella. He called out her name, but she didn't respond. Louis suspected that the loose mast might have knocked her overboard. Louis also stated that the last time he saw Isabella, she was wearing a life jacket. When he was rescued, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer noticed that Louis's backpack was unusually heavy. Upon inspection, officers found $2.25 collectible coins in the backpack, but their origin was unclear. Isabella Helman went missing on May 15th, prompting a 4-day search and rescue operation by the Coast Guard. As no signs of her were found, the operation was officially ended on May 18th. The authorities were suspicious when Louis Bennett, Isabella's husband, requested a letter from the Coast Guard stating that his wife was presumed dead just 24 hours after the search had ended. The Coast Guard denied the request, as it was outside their jurisdiction to issue such a certificate. 6 days later, Louis announced on TV that he was traveling to Cuba to rent a boat and continue the search for his wife on his own. However, just 3 days after making this statement, Louis claimed to have already returned from Cuba and met with Isabella's sister, saying he had checked hospitals but found no signs of her. Louis expressed his despair and resignation to the situation, stating he was struggling to accept that his wife might be gone. He described Isabella as his soulmate and someone he thought he would be with forever. The next day, Louis and the police attempted to retrieve his daughter from his wife's family, but they refused to relinquish her. Louis ultimately took custody of his daughter with the help of the police, despite the scandal surrounding him. During the dispute, Isabella's sister repeatedly accused Louis of being responsible for Isabella's death. Louis's calm behavior and actions after his wife's disappearance raised suspicions among both Isabella's family and the police. Investigations revealed that Isabella and Louis had frequent arguments after the birth of their child. Family, friends, and neighbors all confirmed this. Isabella had confided in loved ones that Louis wanted to move to Australia, but she was opposed to leaving the United States. On May 30th, Louis gave an interview in which he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance. He claimed they had plans for a happy life together, but now he was alone and their daughter would grow up without a mother. While investigating Isabella's disappearance, the police also looked into the origin of valuable coins found among Louis's belongings. It was discovered that Louis had previously worked as a first mate on a yacht. The captain of that yacht had a collection of 617 rare coins worth around $100,000, which was discovered a year earlier. While the yacht was unoccupied and docked in the Caribbean, thieves broke in and stole the coins on board. Although the perpetrator was not caught at the time, the yacht's captain later identified the coins found on Louis Bennett as part of the stolen loot, now that the FBI was investigating their origin. This new information led the FBI to obtain a search warrant for Louis's apartment. Previously, $2.25 coins had been found among his belongings when he was rescued. On June 16, 2017, the search of his apartment uncovered an additional 162 gold coins hidden in a closet. Meanwhile, Lewis had relocated to England, where his parents lived, and had taken his daughter with him. However, due to financial difficulties, he returned to the United States and settled into an apartment valued at $125,000, while also receiving insurance payments for a lost catamaran. On August 28, 2017, Lewis Bennett was arrested in Florida and charged with stealing coins. He pleaded not guilty. A few days later, a federal judge set his bail at $250,000, which Lewis was unable to pay. As a result, he remained in custody while awaiting trial. Additionally, Lewis attempted to have his wife declared dead. Lewis benefited from his wife Isabella's disappearance by gaining control of their shared property and bank accounts. However, the judge refused to declare Isabella dead twice, as the investigation into her disappearance was ongoing. In a separate case, Lewis pleaded guilty to stealing coins and transporting them to the United States in November 2017. Lewis's parents asked the judge to be lenient when sentencing him, citing the fact that his daughter had already lost her mother. In February 2018, Lewis received a sentence of 7 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation. On the same day, Lewis was charged with second-degree murder in Isabella's death. Authorities believed he intentionally caused the catamaran they were on to crash, which was allegedly a staged event to cover up the crime. The prosecutor's case was based on the claim that Lewis wanted to inherit Isabella's wealth to pay off his debts and take their young daughter to live in Australia. Isabella had expressed fear of her husband in text messages a few months before her death, stating that she felt he no longer respected her. She expressed fear about returning home. In a message sent months before her disappearance, Isabella wrote, "If you no longer like or love me, let's resolve this immediately. It's sad how you treated me the entire time." An inspection of the catamaran before it sank revealed that the portholes below the waterline were left open. The damage to the dual holes seemed to originate from within the vessel, near the waterline. The waterline is the point where the surface of the water meets the hull of a floating vessel. An expert hired by the FBI analyzed photos and videos taken by the U.S. Coast Guard of the catamaran before it sank. The expert concluded that Lewis's account of the events was not credible. The analysis suggested that the vessel did not sink due to accidental damage, but rather appeared to have been intentionally scuttled. A professor of nautical architecture and ocean engineering at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy testified in court that the Coast Guard found no evidence of a collision that could have caused the catamaran to sink. Divers inspecting the vessel were cautious due to the risk of collapse, and eventually, the catamaran sank to a depth of over 4,000 feet, preventing a detailed inspection. 2 years after Isabella Helman's disappearance, a judge officially declared her dead. Palm Beach County Circuit Judge Scott Suskauer issued a series of orders stating that Isabella was presumed to have died on May 14, 2017. Despite the passage of time, Isabella's body has not been found, and she has not contacted her family. Based on the available evidence, it is presumed that Isabella is deceased. The statement said, in January 2019, U.S. District Judge Federico Moreno suspended Lewis's February sentencing hearing in Miami and rescheduled it for May 28, saying he would not act until Isabella's family could personally visit her daughter Amelia, who turned 3 in July. In November 2019, Lewis pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and the second-degree murder charge against him was dropped. Before the plea deal, he faced a possible life sentence for second-degree murder, but the new charges limited his maximum sentence to 8 years in prison. According to a document filed with the court, Lewis claimed he didn't remember what he was doing when he discovered his wife was missing. He didn't search for her on the catamaran or in the water, nor did he use flares to signal for help. Instead, Lewis packed his belongings onto a life raft and then intentionally damaged the catamaran to make it flood, allowing him to escape on the raft. Prosecutors stated that Lewis waited 45 minutes after realizing his wife was missing to call for help. Notably, the U.S. Attorney's Office pointed out that Lewis was an experienced sailor with training in emergency procedures, having previously sailed from St. Martin to Australia. don't understand why he failed to use his knowledge to respond to the emergency situation. Prosecutor states that Lewis admitted to being negligent in handing over control of the catamaran to his inexperienced wife, Isabella, resulting in her falling overboard and drowning. Despite being an experienced sailor with a Royal Yachting Association certification, Lewis failed to ensure Isabella wore proper safety gear. In contrast, Isabella had no formal sailing training or experience, and Lewis knew it. Lewis received training in emergency procedures, including man-overboard protocols and night sailing safety, but Isabella did not. The prosecutor notes that only Lewis knows the full story of what happened on the catamaran that night. Following Lewis's guilty plea, Isabella's family, through their lawyer, expressed their immense pain and asked Lewis to show remorse. They stated that while Lewis can never undo the harm caused by taking Isabella away, he continues to cause additional pain by depriving them of contact with his and Isabella's daughter, Amelia. Isabella Helman's family is grieving and missing her dearly. Although they have had limited contact with her daughter Amelia through 3 FaceTime calls, they have not been able to see or hug her in a long time. They long to be reunited with Amelia and provide her with love and care. As a part of their family, they want to be with her. They urged Lewis Bennett to do the right thing. Lewis Bennett, Isabella's husband, was sentenced to 8 years in prison on May 28, 2019, after pleading guilty to manslaughter in connection with her death. During his sentencing hearing, Bennett apologized sincerely to Isabella's family for putting them through immense pain. He acknowledged that his actions led to a devastating tragedy, for which he is truly remorseful. Lewis admitted to making poor decisions that worsened the situation. He expressed regret in federal court in Miami, where he waived his right to appeal as part of his plea bargain. Before the judge delivered the sentence, Lewis requested the opportunity to be released from prison early so that he could continue to care for their daughter, Amelia. Lewis expressed a desire to care for his daughter, saying, "I want to raise her in a way that honors my late wife's wishes." However, the judge ruled against him, sentencing him to 8 years in prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. As a result, Amelia will remain with her paternal grandparents in England for the time being. The case of Christy Lynn Mullins. Christy Lynn Mullins was born on August 28, 1960, in Columbus, Ohio, one of 6 children in a large family. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, away from the noise and chaos of the city. In the summer of 1975, 14-year-old Christy spent most of her days socializing with friends and family, often going to the local neighborhood swimming pool. In late August, Christy babysat for a family friend on the evening of August 22nd. The next day, August 23rd, she woke up around noon and decided to go swimming to cool off. She invited her sister Kim to join her and they went to the residential area. While Kim went swimming, Christy relaxed on a deck chair. A short time later, Kim went ashore and found Christy nowhere to be seen. But Kim decided not to look for her and instead stayed at the pool. Surprisingly, when Kim returned home, Christy was not there. Hours passed and Christy still hadn't come home. Kim became even more worried. She decided to look for Christy and ran into a neighbor who told her that the police had found the body of a young woman a few miles away, but they had not been able to identify it. Kim rushed home to tell her parents, who immediately called the police to report Christy missing. It was very likely that the body found belonged to Christy, so the police directed them to the morgue for identification. Although it was difficult to recognize the identity of the body due to the severely bruised face, Christy's mother eventually accepted that the body was Christy's, her beloved daughter, thanks to the birthmark on her leg. Police later explained to the family what had happened. It turned out that at about 2:30 p.m. that same day, a man reported finding a body in the woods behind the local shopping center. He, his wife, and son had gone there to buy toys, but before entering the store, their son wanted to take a walk on the trail behind the building. This path was a popular walking path leading to a river and the area was famous for its beauty. Together with his parents, the son went for a walk on this trail. During their hike, they came across a disturbing scene about 10 yards down the trail. A man was kneeling on top of someone and repeatedly beating him with a wooden object. When he saw the family, he immediately ran away. The father rushed to the scene and found a seriously injured little girl covered in blood. His wife, who had medical training, checked the victim's pulse, but there was none. The father quickly went to a nearby shopping center and called the police from a store. He and his wife provided investigators with a detailed description of the suspect, who was a tall, slim young man with long black hair, wearing jeans, shorts, and boots, about 20 years old. Police created a sketch of the suspect based on their description and distributed it to patrol officers. However, the investigation of the crime scene yielded no results. The wooden object used as the murder weapon was found, but they discovered no other evidence linking the perpetrator. Notably, the victim's hands were tied with a telephone cord and her bikini top was pulled down. Her t-shirt and shoes were found next to her body. Despite these signs, forensic experts found no evidence that a sexual assault had occurred. Luckily, detectives were able to continue their investigation thanks to new information from Kim, who told them about a conversation between Christy and a friend, Carol. The police summoned Carol. Carol recounted to police a suspicious phone call she had received from a stranger claiming to be a local DJ. The man had called her to talk about a fake cheerleading competition at the state fair which was supposedly being held behind the local shopping mall. He announced the event would start at 1:45 p.m. and had told Carol to wait for someone at the entrance to the forest trail. The police were skeptical about Carol's story, and when they dug deeper, they discovered many inconsistencies. According to Carol, she had originally planned to attend the event with her sister, but they had run into Christy and her sister on the way. Carol then invited Christy to join her, and they left their sisters behind to go to the mall. However, when they arrived at the entrance to the woods, no one appeared, and Carol claimed that she had gone to the shopping center to ask for the time. When she turned around, Christy was gone. The police investigation revealed that there had been no cheerleading competitions in town, reason for Carol and Christy's trip to the woods. Police suspected that the mysterious phone call might have been a ruse to lure Carol into the woods, but they were unable to trace the call to identify the caller. Further investigation revealed discrepancies in Carol's story. She claimed to have met Christy and her sister on the street, but Kim said they had been at the pool and Carol had come to meet them there. Additionally, Christy's mother reported a strange conversation with Carol later that evening, which raised further suspicions. Carol apologized to Christy's mother and revealed that she had been the intended target of a murder involving two people. However, she quickly retracted her words and left. Christy's mother reported this to the police. The police questioned Carol again, but she denied making a statement and stuck to her original story. Carol was then given a polygraph test, which did not reveal any signs of deception when Carol answered key questions. As a result, investigators shifted focus away from Carol and pursued other leads. Police intensified their search for the killer 3 days after Christy's murder. A police officer patrolling the streets of Columbus spotted a man who bore a striking resemblance to a sketch of Christy's killer. Patrol officers quickly called detectives to the scene and asked Jack to accompany them to the station for questioning. The man, Jack Carmen, 25, agreed to go with them. However, the police soon realized that Jack was severely mentally disabled, with an IQ of about 50 points. Results based on many different tests. As a result, Jack had limited communication skills and could not read or write. He was cared for by a specialist medical facility and lived in a supervised apartment. Despite these challenges, detectives could not ignore the striking resemblance between Jack and the composite sketch of the suspect in Christy's case. The interrogation process was extremely difficult due to Jack's limited ability to understand and answer questions. Most of the time, he just answered with one word or stayed silent. The detectives began to question whether Jack was capable of fully understanding their questions. To improve the situation, they had to ask very simple and specific questions. After 6 hours of questioning, detectives were finally starting to get results. They were finally able to extract a confession from Jack. According to his testimony, on the day in question he had left his apartment, taken the bus to the shopping center and bought a shirt and pants. As Jack walked through the parking lot, he saw Christy sitting on a fence near the entrance to a wooded trail. He approached her, tied her up by tying her hands, and then dragged her into the woods where he carried out the assault. After the attack, Christy tried to run away, but Jack quickly caught up with her. He picked up a nearby piece of wood and repeatedly hit her in the head. Jack then ran to the main road in front of the shopping center and boarded the bus. The next day, police took Jack to the forest where he allegedly committed the crime. There, he pointed out the exact spot and provided specific details that only the perpetrator would know, including the fact that the piece of wood used to strike the victim broke in half. Investigators also verified the testimony, asking the couple who found Christy to identify the person they had seen on the day of the incident. Both identified the man they had seen as Jack. As a result, Jack was charged with multiple offenses, including assault and murder. The prosecution chose to include it in the charges. The prosecutor initially sought the death penalty, but Jack's lawyer negotiated a deal. In exchange for a life sentence, Jack would plead guilty before the judge, thereby avoiding execution. The case moved swiftly, with thousands of people following. Just 11 days after the murder, on September 3rd, Jack was sentenced to life in prison. However, after the trial, public opinion began to shift, and many people started to question Jack's guilt. As more details about his confession and his background emerged in the media, people began to wonder whether he was truly capable of committing such a heinous crime. Those who knew Jack found it hard to believe that he was capable of the crime. He was a passive, timid, and compliant person who would agree to anything if pushed hard enough. In the past, he had even taken the blame for something he didn't do, like the time he claimed responsibility for breaking a boiler at a charity center, when in fact someone else was to blame. This behavior raised doubts about his ability to make a genuine confession to the crime. His supporters felt that the police must have manipulated him into confessing by feeding him information and asking pressured questions. For instance, if the police asked him if he hit the victim with a piece of wood, and he answered yes, they could use that as a confession. However, this approach can be unreliable, especially considering Jack's tendency to confess to anything when under threat. Even the mention of the electric chair was enough to make him agree to whatever the detectives wanted. Furthermore, the police took Jack to the crime scene at the same time as the witnesses, a married couple who later identified him at the police station. This raised concerns that the witnesses had been biased, as they had already seen Jack and knew he was a suspect, despite the police's claims that they never crossed paths. There were several red flags surrounding Jack's alleged involvement in the crime. For instance, the police failed to locate the bus driver or any passengers who claimed to have seen Jack on his way to the city center, which contradicted his own statement. Moreover, multiple people at the charity organization building where Jack lived and worked said to have seen him at around 1:30 p.m. This created a major timing issue. Even if Jack had left immediately after being seen by these witnesses, the bus ride to the shopping center on the outskirts of town would have taken at least 40 minutes. Given the crime was committed at 1:50 p.m., it was logistically impossible for Jack to have made it on time. This cast serious doubts about Jack's guilt and raised suspicions that the police may have coerced his confession. Christy's parents, too, began questioning whether Jack was the true culprit. At the height of the controversy, approximately 70 individuals gathered in front of City Hall on September 9th to draw attention to the case and advocate for a comprehensive investigation. They established a public committee aimed at securing justice for Jack. As a result, Jack was assigned a new lawyer, who swiftly petitioned for a case review. After several months, a judge dismissed Jack's original confession and ordered a new trial, putting the onus on the prosecution to establish his guilt from the beginning. This marked a daunting challenge for the prosecution, making their case almost unviable. Norman Mills, Christy's father, began his own investigation while preparations for the new trial were underway. Dissatisfied with the way the detectives had worked, Norman took matters into his own hands. Immediately after the murder, Norman and several neighbors searched the area where Christy was found. They discovered a bloody pair of jean shorts and men's underwear in the woods. They turned the items over to the police, who had initially missed them. It was unclear whether these items were related to the case or if they had been examined for evidence. Jack's new trial began in 1977, 2 years after the murder. The defense had two tasks: first and foremost, to prove Jack's innocence and also to try to identify the real killer. In fact, they already had a pretty strong candidate for the role, who they considered to be the prime suspect. The man who found Christ's body along with his wife was Henry Newell, who was 25 years old at the time of the murder. At the beginning of the trial, Jack's lawyers had amassed an impressive list of reasons to suspect Henry of murder, and during the trial, the list grew even longer. Initially, Henry attracted attention because of his criminal record. Beginning in his teenage years, he had been arrested multiple times for various crimes, serving 3 prison sentences. He had successfully escaped from prison twice before being captured and brought back. At the time of Jack's trial, he was serving his 4th sentence, this time for burning down a house to collect insurance money. Lawyers also reviewed evidence from Christ's case and found some very suspicious details in his testimony. Henry said he had found her body, ran over, and threw a bloody piece of wood aside. He explained this by saying that he was in a state of shock at the time, but acting like that still seemed odd. Why did he pick up the murder weapon and throw it from his body for no apparent reason? He also testified that he thought the girl was still alive, so he took off his shirt and pressed it to her face. This action also raised questions. Did he actually try to stop the bleeding, or was his shirt stained with blood during the murder, and he needed to justify it somehow? Jack's lawyer found a store clerk in the mall where Henry had run to call the police. She said he was not wearing a shirt but was wearing jean shorts, although by the time police arrived, he was wearing a different pair of pants. The employee also confirmed that Henry had a new bruise on his face, as if someone had hit him. When asked why she didn't immediately report this to the police, she said no one had asked her. The officers themselves should have noticed this bruising but ignored it. Henry also agreed to take a polygraph test, but he ended up vomiting right on the machine. Another witness was Henry's neighbor, who said that on the night of the murder, he had talked to Henry and noticed many new scratches on his hands. The man also mentioned seeing a telephone cord in Henry's garage that was the same color and shape as the cord used to tie the victim's hands. That's not all. The neighbor said that Henry had once told him a very strange story. He claimed to know Chris's 14-year-old friend Carol, and that they had once swum naked together in the pool. This story shocked everyone involved in the case. It turned out that Henry was acquainted with Carol, who was also directly involved in the case. His wife, Pam, also testified in court, saying everything had happened exactly as they told police on the first day. They had gone to the mall, and their son wanted to go for a walk. They went into the woods and found the body. Pam added that up until that point, Henry had remained at home and only stepped outside for a few minutes to scare away neighborhood children who had begun throwing firecrackers into their yard. Carol also testified, saying she had never met Henry. She was also asked about her intentions in telling Christ's mother that things should not have escalated to this point. But Carol again claimed she did not remember saying anything like that. Henry himself repeated his story without any changes and insisted that he had nothing to do with the crime. One of the most important moments of the trial was the showing of the entire recording of Jack's interrogation. After watching it, it became clear to everyone that Jack had simply been forced to confirm the detective's words that he had committed murder. Jack barely said anything and didn't seem to fully understand what the police wanted from him. But that was not the most important moment of the trial. On the 5th day, another unexpected witness appeared. It was Bobby, Henry's stepson, and his testimony truly shocked everyone following the case. Bobby revealed that that day, Henry had indeed gone out of the house to chase away the children who had thrown firecrackers into the yard. When Henry returned home, his shirt and sandals were missing, and Henry had scars on his hands and face. Bobby was told by his parents that they would be going to the shopping center, but when they arrived, they instead took him on a walk in the woods behind the center. Bobby claims he never asked to go for a walk, which contradicts what his parents initially said. During the walk, they found Henry's torn sandal and then Christy's body. Bobby's mother instructed him not to tell anyone about what he saw. At the trial, Bobby's grandmother testified about a disturbing comment made by Henry during Christy's farewell ceremony. After expressing her sadness about Christy's death, Henry replied, "It will teach her to keep her mouth shut." Another witness, Henry's friend, came forward and said that Henry had confessed to him that he accidentally killed Christy. Although the evidence clearly pointed to Henry's involvement, the prosecutor surprisingly announced that they would not pursue a case against Henry. The prosecutor also claimed that the initial investigation was handled correctly, despite acknowledging that the police missed or ignored many clues from the beginning. The public was outraged by this decision, leading the prosecutor to change his mind 2 days later and agree to reopen the investigation into Christy's death. Christy's father refused to give up on seeking justice and filed a civil lawsuit against Jack, but not because he believed Jack was involved in the murder. Rather, he hoped to gain access to the case files and gather more information. Unfortunately, this effort also proved unsuccessful. The case had remained stagnant until February 2013, when Henry died of terminal cancer. Despite this, in the same year, former attorney John Aller became interested in the case and conducted his own investigation. He contacted all parties involved in gathering new information. Christy's relatives had provided John with a box of records that Christy's father had collected. After reviewing the records and talking to dozens of people, John believed that Henry was the culprit behind Christy's murder. John's investigation revealed that Carol had bought marijuana from Henry, which made him suspect that Henry was involved in the crime. This new discovery created a possible connection between Henry and Carol, which could explain why Carol brought Christy to the forest. One theory is that Carol planned to meet Henry in the forest to buy an illegal substance. It's possible that Carol invited Christy along, using the DJ story as a cover. A more sinister explanation suggests that Carol brought Christy to the forest at Henry's request, intending for him to harm her. However, Christy resisted, as evidenced by Henry's injuries, and he ultimately killed her. When John took over the case, Henry had passed away from cancer at the age of 63. However, John continued his work and released a book about Christy's murder. The release of the book sparked a new wave of interest, and Christy's relatives demanded that the investigation be reopened. Some of Henry's relatives also confirmed that Henry was the one who killed the girl. This led to the reopening of the murder investigation in May 2014. Detectives re-examined the evidence, interviewed dozens of people, and reassessed Henry's confession. They examined Christy's clothes and found traces of semen, but they were too small for DNA analysis. The investigation lasted until late 2015, when detectives announced that Henry was the one who had committed the crime. But because he had passed away, the case could not go to court. The investigation ended with the conclusion that Henry had left home, gone to the road behind the shopping center, seen Christy alone, and decided to assault her with a telephone cord, taking her deep into the woods. Henry had attacked Christy, injuring her. Then he killed her with a piece of wood. Returning home, Henry recounted the incident to his wife, and the two began to make plans to avoid punishment. For many years afterward, Carol never revealed the truth. Police later apologized to Christy's family for their careless handling of the incident. The case of Natasha Cournoyer. Natasha Cournoyer, 37 years old, has gone missing suddenly and without any notice. She didn't visit her mother, respond to phone calls, or return home. As the day went on, it became clear that none of her friends or colleagues had seen her either. Her worried relatives reported her missing at 5 p.m., prompting a police investigation. Natasha worked as a public relations specialist for the Correctional Service of Canada. Detectives began by interviewing her co-workers. Upon arrival, they found her car still parked nearby. A nervous-looking man, Michel Trottier, was standing by her vehicle. He claimed to be in a relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. The back door of Natasha's car had scratches, but it was unclear if they were related to her disappearance. With no reason to suspect Michel Trottier of involvement, detectives continued their investigation. Co-workers reported that Natasha was at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. She seemed to be in a good mood, friendly, and untroubled, with no signs of anything amiss. On October 2nd, Natasha needed a day off to deal with issues related to her recently deceased father's tombstone. To make up for time, she worked longer hours on October 1st and left the office around 8 p.m. According to her friends, Natasha was a kind and open person with no known conflicts or enemies. The police launched a large-scale search for Natasha, involving aviation and K-9 units. Initially, they focused on the area around the parking lot, but found no clues to aid the investigation. Natasha's friends and relatives distributed flyers with her photo, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The first few hours after a person goes missing are crucial in finding witnesses or evidence. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police weren't notified until the evening of October 2nd, 21 hours after she left work. The search for Natasha took place from October, but unfortunately, no leads were found. Her family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Natasha's boyfriend, Michel Trottier, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea for her safe release. Meanwhile, the police were investigating their personal lives. They had been together for 4 years, but their relationship had been rocky, with multiple breakups and reconciliations. The police explored all possible scenarios surrounding Natasha's disappearance. They reviewed CCTV footage from her workplace, both inside and outside the building. The footage showed Natasha arriving at 9:04 a.m. and leaving at 8:07 p.m. She had parked her car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot, and the cameras captured her walking towards it. However, she eventually disappeared from view due to the darkness. After a few minutes, the car headlights turned on and the car started moving, but instead of heading towards the exit, it drove to the opposite side of the parking lot, which was also poorly lit. The car stopped and the headlights went out. The vehicle remained in this position for about 20 minutes before moving towards the exit. It was determined that this car was not Natasha's, as she owned a Mazda. Further investigation revealed that the car in the video was a Ford Windstar minivan, which had entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked next to Natasha's car. Based on the video footage, the police concluded that Natasha Cournoyer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. On the 5th day of the search, October 6, 2009, the focus shifted. The body was located next to a dirt road that led to the riverbank. The news of Natasha's death devastated her relatives and friends, who were further disturbed by the medical examiner's report. According to the report, Natasha's cause of death was strangulation. Additionally, she had suffered 9 facial injuries, including a broken nose, and had marks on her wrists and ankles indicating that she had been bound. Seminal fluid was also found inside her body, which would serve as a source of DNA evidence. While awaiting DNA analysis results, detectives attempted to identify the owner of a minivan captured on camera the day Natasha vanished. In February 2009, there were 2 motels near Natasha's workplace. On October 16, 2009, 10 days after her body was discovered, police visited both motels' Windstar. The guest was 48 years old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with 2 prior convictions. In 1993, Claude was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 2 years of probation for coercing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sex. In February 2005, he received a 40-month prison sentence for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl. She managed to escape and run to a neighbor's house. Claude's 40-month sentence for the attempted kidnapping of a child raises questions about the severity of his punishment. In November 2008, Claude was released and started working as a carpenter. He married a woman with 2 sons, and they all lived together in a house about a 10-minute drive from where Natasha Cournoyer disappeared. Detectives found out Claude checked into a motel the night Natasha went missing. Forensic experts examined the motel room and discovered dark red stains on the carpet, which they sent for analysis. The same day, detectives visited Claude at his home. Since he had a prior prison record, the police already had his DNA on file. However, they needed time to compare it to the DNA found on Natasha's body. Claude claimed he didn't know Natasha but admitted to frequently visiting the Lido motel because it was cheap. He told the detectives he was unhappy with his intimate life with his wife and often rented a motel room to meet women offering paid sex services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha disappeared, Claude said he couldn't remember anything, including staying at the Lido motel. He attributed his memory loss to excessive substance use, but his memory partially returned soon after. On November 5, 2009, a month after the body was discovered, detectives returned to Claude LaRouche's house. This time, however, it was not for a conversation. DNA analysis revealed that the seminal fluid found in Natasha Cournoyer's body matched LaRouche's. Additionally, Natasha's DNA was detected in the motel room Claude rented and inside his car. Montreal police say there's no link between the crime and Cournoyer's job at Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim didn't know the suspect. Following Claude's arrest, Montreal Police Inspector Daniel Rousseau stated that citizens could now feel safer in public. The news of the arrest shocked Claude's neighbors, who described him as a friendly and polite individual. The next day, on November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche became a suspect in Natasha Cournoyer's case. Initially, he denied any wrongdoing, but faced with substantial evidence, he confessed to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed her death was accidental and not intentional. During his February 2011 trial, two differing accounts of the events emerged, one from Claude and his defense team and the other from the prosecution. According to Claude's testimony, he was waiting in a parking lot for a drug dealer on the evening in question. While sitting in his car, Natasha appeared beside him. He then attacked her, forced her into his vehicle and shut the door. Afterwards, Claude conversed with Natasha, and she allegedly agreed to accompany him to a motel. Claude LaRouche experienced memory lapses, which left him unable to recall why he stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes or what he did during that time. However, he conveniently remembered specific moments that worked in his favor. According to LaRouche, Natasha offered to satisfy his demands in exchange for her freedom while they were in the motel room. He agreed, but after she fulfilled his requests, they got into an argument. Claude lost control, attacked Natasha, and ultimately strangled her. He then cleaned the room, moved her body to his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, after the substances he had taken wore off, he realized the gravity of his actions. Claude chose to get rid of Natasha's body. As he drove to the location where the body was later found, he cut her documents and bank cards into pieces and threw them out the car window. However, it's crucial to remember that this account comes from LaRouche himself, and the more he shared, the more inconsistencies and questions emerged about his claims. According to Claude's testimony, the day after disposing of Natasha's body, he returned to the scene and covered her with a blanket, fearing she would freeze. He revisited the body again the next day to retrieve the blanket, worried that it would hinder her discovery. LaRouche's statements suggest that his actions were influenced by a clouded consciousness, leading to illogical decisions. He claimed he did not intend to take Natasha's life, which he attempted to convey to those present during the trial. The prosecution's case relied on physical evidence and a witness testimony. The witness stated that while walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha disappeared, he saw Claude attempt to attack a jogger around 7 p.m. However, Claude retreated when he noticed the witness and his dog. Natasha Cournoyer was attacked an hour later. The prosecutor was convinced that Claude had bound and abducted Natasha, taking her to a motel where she ultimately lost her life. In June 2011, Claude LaRouche was found guilty and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that just 2 weeks after Natasha's murder, Claude attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel. However, she managed to fend him off by biting his finger. As a result, Claude was deemed a dangerous offender under Canadian law, rendering his prison sentence indefinite and significantly reducing his chances of early parole. Natasha had a peaceful and fulfilling life, with aspirations and objectives, all of which were brutally taken away by a man with a history of serious crimes. Despite his past, Claude was allowed to roam free, living among the community without adequate supervision. The fact that he had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl raises questions about how he was able to reintegrate into society without proper monitoring. Natasha's loved ones continue to grapple with these unanswered questions, haunted by the thought that if the system had functioned correctly and Claude had been held accountable, Natasha might still be alive today. The case of Corey Richens. Eric Richens was born on May 13, 1982 and left a lasting impact on those around him. As a child, Eric was passionate about sports. Eric's true passion, however, was anything that involved being outdoors. He was an exceptional hunter, known for his impressive marksmanship, and had amassed an impressive collection of trophy animals from around the world. With his vibrant personality, Eric had the ability to light up any room he entered, spreading joy and laughter through his storytelling, playful pranks, and contagious laughter. As an adventure seeker, Eric lived life to the fullest in Utah, where he owned a wide range of motorized vehicles, including trucks, four-wheelers, and snowmobiles. He loved exploring the outdoors and relishing the thrill of adventure. Despite his love for fun and adventure, Eric was deeply committed to his faith, being a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Eric's family supported him on a 2-year mission trip to Mexico City, where he became fluent in Spanish. After high school, he attended the University of Utah, earning a degree in international studies with a minor in Spanish in 2009. While working in construction, Eric frequently visited Home Depot where he met Curry Darden. Over time, they developed a friendly connection, and Eric found himself attracted to her charming personality and beauty. However, he was too shy to approach her directly, so Eric asked a friend to help him get her phone number. One day, while Eric was shopping at Home Depot, his friend discreetly asked Curry for her number, telling her that Eric was interested in getting to know her better. Eric anxiously waited to see if his plan would work. Eric took the next step and called Curry to set up their first in-person meeting, unaware that it would be a life-changing event. As soon as they met, they clicked, and their first date marked the start of a romantic journey. As they introduced each other to their families, their bond grew stronger. Curry's family welcomed Eric with open arms, and Eric's family was equally impressed by Curry's character and how well she fit with him. Although Eric's sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious, they soon warmed up to Curry and accepted her into their family. In 2013, Eric and Curry got married in an intimate ceremony, making their relationship official. After their wedding, Curry gave birth to their first child, Carter, followed by Ashton and then Weston, completing their ideal family. Eric naturally took to being a father, and his boys looked up to him. Eric took great pride in his sons' accomplishments, whether they excelled academically, athletically, or artistically. He consistently showed his support by attending their events and celebrating their successes. Later, Eric established a successful stone masonry business, which flourished due to his exceptional craftsmanship and attention to detail. Clients sought him out for his expertise in creating beautiful stonework. The business provided Eric and his family with financial security. Additionally, Curry, who worked in real estate, contributed to the family's income. Her entrepreneurial spirit, coupled with her knowledge of the local market, made her a valuable asset. She would buy homes, renovate them, and sell them for a profit. The Richens family enjoyed a wealthy lifestyle, symbolizing the epitome of success. However, their seemingly perfect life came to a sudden end on March 4, 2020, when Curry called 911 to report that her husband Eric was unresponsive. When paramedics arrived, they determined that Eric had already passed away. Devastated, Curry called her mother Lisa, who rushed to be by her side. Curry's brothers, DJ and Ronnie, were present too, overcome with tears and shock. The three of them struggled to come to terms with Eric's passing. Curry recounted that the evening had begun on a happy note as they celebrated her latest real estate business milestone, the purchase of a luxurious mansion. Before retiring to bed, Curry had even prepared Eric's favorite drink, a Moscow Mule, mixing ginger beer with vodka. Curry went to bed around 9 p.m., but ended up sleeping in her 9-year-old son's room because he was having nightmares. Later, around 3 a.m., she returned to the bedroom she shared with Eric. When she touched him, she was alarmed to find him ice-cold and unresponsive. Despite trying to wake him, she couldn't rouse him and knew something was seriously wrong. As she waited for the paramedics to arrive, Curry remembered the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric, which she claimed to have followed. The paramedics were baffled by Eric's cause of death, speculating that it might have been an aneurysm given his apparent good health and lack of known medical conditions. However, further investigation revealed that Eric had complained to Curry about chest pains the night before his death, which initially reinforced the aneurysm theory. But the autopsy results were shocking. Eric's cause of death was ultimately determined to be a lethal dose of fentanyl. Fentanyl is a highly potent pain medication that can be extremely dangerous and even deadly when taken in excessive amounts. After Eric's death, a critical question remained. How did this substance end up in his system? From the start, Curry and her family quickly blamed Eric's recreational drug use as the reason fentanyl was present. Curry explained that Eric would take a THC-infused gummy every night to relax, as he preferred THC, the psychoactive active ingredient in cannabis, to unwind. However, Curry, her mother, and brothers had concerns about the origin of these gummies, suspecting that Eric didn't always buy them from trustworthy sources and instead purchased them illegally. Eric's family strongly disagreed with these claims, believing there was more to the story, and urged investigators to explore other possibilities. Despite trying to move on, Curry faced significant challenges, according to her brother Ronnie, as the absence of their husband and father left a huge gap in their lives, leading their 3 sons to act out due to the uncertainty surrounding his death. Corey, grieving and seeking comfort for her children, turned to a creative outlet to cope with her emotions. She wrote and self-published a children's book on Amazon titled Are You With Me?, which aimed to help kids understand and deal with the loss of a loved one. The book tells the story of a young boy struggling to come to terms with his father's death through illustrations and narrative. In the book, Corey portrayed Eric, her late husband, as a protective angel always watching over their son. Her mother Lisa praised the book, saying it brought some comfort to Corey and her grandchildren as they navigated their emotions and rebuilt their lives. However, detectives investigating Eric's death soon uncovered evidence suggesting foul play. Just weeks after Curry appeared on local Utah news stations promoting her book and sharing her grief, she was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023. The community was stunned by the arrest, and the tragic turn of events transformed what was initially a heartwarming story of a grieving wife and mother into an unbelievable tale of betrayal and tragedy. Corey is accused of murdering Eric by poisoning him. Eric's family believes Corey deliberately put a lethal dose of fentanyl in the Moscow Mule she made for him on the night he died. However, Curry's lawyer claims that no fentanyl was found in the glasses at their home. Curry denies any involvement in Eric's death, saying she had no reason to harm him. Her mother, Lisa, was shocked to hear about her daughter's alleged involvement and told investigators that the couple was happy and had no reason to kill each other. But as detectives dug deeper, they found that Corey and Eric's relationship was not as perfect as they seemed. The couple had disagreements, and Corey, who had given up her career to be a stay-at-home mom, wanted to be independent. She was also growing increasingly frustrated with Eric's frequent hunting trips. According to Lisa, Eric was unfaithful in his marriage, and he confided in her about the affair along with Corey. To address their marital issues, Eric and Corey sought counseling. However, Eric's family denies that he ever cheated on her. Eric genuinely loved his sons and wanted to save the marriage. Despite his efforts, Eric was preparing for a potential divorce. He set up a secret trust with his sister Katie without revealing his intentions. The investigation uncovered that Eric had 6 life insurance policies worth $3 million. Furthermore, Curry forged Eric's signature on an additional $100,000 policy just 2 months before his death. It was also discovered that Curry allegedly stole money from Eric's personal accounts and misused business funds over several years. Contrary to her claims, Curry's house flipping business was failing, according to Eric's family representative. Corey's company was deeply in debt, with millions of dollars owed. According to the spokesperson, Corey urgently needed cash, and a prenuptial agreement signed before the marriage stated that she would not inherit the business assets if they were to divorce. However, if Eric were to pass away before her during their marriage, the assets would transfer to Corey. The spokesperson's claims were disputed by Corey's attorney, who maintained that the business was not in financial trouble. The attorney explained that the debt was a normal part of the house flipping business, as it relied on lines of credit that would be repaid once the properties were sold. Corey's attorney clarified that the large debt figure mentioned was simply a result of regular business transactions. Corey's mother, Lisa, recalled that Eric had been supportive of Corey's business ventures, particularly when they bought the mansion where they were celebrating on the night of his death. In Yuba Valley, Utah, a 10-acre estate with a mansion sat vacant since its construction in 2017. Despite being close to popular ski resorts and Deer Creek Reservoir, this prime location offered endless opportunities for outdoor recreation. Cournoyer, with the help of investors, bought the mansion with plans to renovate and transform it into a recreational hub. Her goal was to sell the property at a significant profit. After consulting an accountant, Cournoyer and Eric discovered that they could potentially make a $12 million profit from the sale of the property, a substantial return on the initial $3 million investment. However, there's a discrepancy in Eric's involvement. While he seems to be on board with the purchase, his family claims he was against it and had a heated argument with Cournoyer about buying the mansion. Eric's family spokesperson claims that Cournoyer gave Eric a drink containing fentanyl on the night of his death, and they believe this was not Cournoyer's first attempt to harm Eric. They alleged that in 2019, during a trip to Greece, Eric became violently ill after Cournoyer gave him a drink. But Cournoyer's brother Ronnie denies this, saying Eric was mistakenly given an alcoholic drink by a bartender while taking antibiotics. Eric's family also claims that Cournoyer tried to kill Eric again on Valentine's Day 2022, a month before his death, when she brought him a sandwich that caused him to break out in hives and struggle to breathe. After Eric's death, Cournoyer's behavior was questioned, including an incident where she allegedly attacked her sister Amy when she tried to open a safe containing a large amount of cash. Cournoyer claimed she was defending herself to retrieve important documents, but was charged with assault and pleaded no contest in June 2023. Cournoyer appeared in court for a 4-hour bail hearing, during which her attorney tried to convince the judge to release her on bail. Prosecutors presented 3 witnesses and evidence to argue that Cournoyer had poisoned her husband. One of the witnesses, a cell phone expert, testified about Google searches found on Cournoyer's phone, including queries about retrieving deleted iPhone messages, FBI's ability to find deleted messages, and the lethal dose of fentanyl. However, Cournoyer's attorney countered that these searches were conducted after her husband's death, as Cournoyer sought answers to the accusations against her. The prosecution also questioned the lead detective about potential sources Cournoyer might have used to obtain the drugs that killed Eric. According to the detective, a woman named Carmen Laba, who claimed to work as a cleaner for Cournoyer's business and home, told investigators about a meeting that took place in early 2022. During a call, Cournoyer asked Carmen to buy fentanyl pills for an investor with a back injury. Carmen, who had a history of drug-related crimes and was on probation, agreed to the request. She later told detectives that she purchased 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and met with Cournoyer to exchange them for cash. This exchange happened on February 11, 2022, just 3 days before Valentine's Day. Around the same time, court documents suggest Cournoyer tried to poison Eric with a sandwich. Carmen also told detectives that Cournoyer contacted her again, looking for even stronger drugs. She said Cournoyer paid her with a check this time. Specifically, Carmen claimed that Cournoyer wrote her a check for $1,300 about a week after Eric's death. However, Cournoyer's attorney questioned whether the check could have been payment for cleaning services instead, and the detective acknowledged that this was possible. Cournoyer's lawyer tried to discredit Carmen by pointing out her criminal history, including 4 first-degree felonies, and suggesting that she might not be a trustworthy witness. The lawyer claimed that Carmen may have been coerced into saying she sold drugs to avoid a long prison sentence, as the detective allegedly told her she would face serious consequences if she didn't cooperate. The lawyer also asked if there was any physical evidence to prove Carmen had bought drugs. The detective admitted that they found no text messages showing Cournoyer asking Carmen for drugs, and no witnesses came forward to confirm they had seen the exchange. At the bail hearing, Eric's sister spoke to the judge, expressing her family's distress over Eric's death, and their fear that if Cournoyer was released on bail, he would cause them further pain. Eric's sister asked the judge to keep Cournoyer in custody, and the judge accepted her request. Meanwhile, Cournoyer's family was upset because Cournoyer was not allowed to leave jail before her trial and would have to stay there. They believed that Cournoyer's time in jail was affecting her mental and physical health. In 2023, something serious happened to Cournoyer while she was taking medicine given to her by the jail officials. She had a seizure and was quickly taken to the hospital from the jail. While Cournoyer was in jail, she claimed that the officials gave her the wrong medication, which caused her to experience adverse effects. Fortunately, She recovered after being treated at a hospital. During her hospital stay, jail officials found a handwritten, unsent letter in her cell. They filed it into court records, claiming it was a note from Curry to her mother. Prosecutors argued that this letter added additional evidence of Curry's intentions and motivations. In November 2023, they requested a no-contact order to restrict Curry's access to her mother and brothers, mainly due to the letter. Prosecutors claimed that the letter was evidence of witness tampering. According to prosecutors, the letter instructed Corey's mother on how her brother Ronnie should testify in court. Specifically, Curry allegedly wanted Ronnie to claim that Eric had admitted to obtaining pain pills containing fentanyl from Mexico during his trip abroad. The letter also instructed Ronnie to obtain text messages from Eric discussing his drug use. Curry stressed the need to link Eric's Mexico activities to his alleged drug involvement. Despite this, she vehemently denied accusations that a letter was an attempt to tamper with witnesses, claiming it was a work of fiction she wrote as a fantasy story. The judge ruled in her favor as the prosecution failed to prove witness tampering. Currently, Corey and Eric's family are fighting for custody of their 3 sons, who are living with one of Eric's relatives. Although Corey is in jail, she still gets to see her sons through twice-weekly video calls. While her family has not been allowed private visits with the children, they regularly attend their sports events and practices, which are open to the public. If convicted of poisoning her husband Eric with fentanyl, Corey faces a sentence of 25 years to life. Multiple civil lawsuits have been filed against Corey, all related to Eric's estate. A central issue in these cases is the custody of Eric's children. Eric's family thinks that Corey's family is motivated by a desire to control Eric's assets, as whoever gets custody of the children will also gain control of his money. Corey's trial is scheduled to start in 2025. The case of Joanie Berry. Joanie Berry was born on August 26, 1983, and grew up to be a happy and friendly person with a large social circle and a love for parties. During her school days, she was an active member of the local cheerleading team. After completing high school, Joanie enrolled at East Tennessee State University to pursue a degree in psychology and criminology. It was during this period that she met Jason White, and they began dating. The couple got engaged just before graduating in late 2004. At the age of 21, Joanie decided to pursue a master's degree in psychology, which led her to temporarily relocate to Knoxville for her studies. While in Knoxville, she worked part-time at a children's educational center where she discovered her passion for helping kids. Meanwhile, Joanie's fiancé, Jason, was studying law in a different state. Despite the distance, they remained close and began planning their wedding in Knoxville. Initially, Joanie stayed with her friend, Jason Amami, who had also attended college with her and later moved to Knoxville. They shared a 2-bedroom apartment, and Jason allowed Joanie to stay there until she found her own place to live. Joanie had 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and the other at a children's hospital. On the Sunday night of December 5th, after finishing her shift at the jewelry store, Joanie went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. Later, she returned home and spent her evening wrapping presents for the children at the educational center, chatting with her neighbor, and then retreating to her room. Before going to bed, she had a phone conversation with her boyfriend. Around 4 in the morning, Jason Amami was awoken by a scream from a woman. At first, he thought Joanie was having a nightmare, so he went to her room to check on her. However, he was shocked to find a stranger wielding a knife. The intruder attacked Jason, and they engaged in a fierce struggle. Eventually, Jason managed to fend off the attacker and made a dash for the door. He rushed out of the apartment and ran to the nearest convenience store, almost a kilometer away, to call for help. When the store clerk saw Jason, who was covered in blood, they immediately called 911. Explained to the police what had happened when they arrived at the scene. At their apartment, the police found Joanie lying in the hallway that connected 5 apartments. She was still alive, but barely conscious. When the police questioned her about the attacker, she could only provide weak clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area, but were unable to find the attacker. They rushed Joanie to the nearest hospital, where despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save her. The doctor reported that she had suffered more than 20 stab wounds, making survival highly unlikely. Jason had 8 wounds from the attacker. Although only one was critical, he received medical attention, and his life was no longer in danger. Meanwhile, the detectives began investigating the crime scene. They discovered blood in the hallway, indicating that Joanie had attempted to seek help from her neighbors, but none of them had opened their doors. Next to Joani's room, the detectives found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Jason, which the attacker had used with such force that it became bent and damaged. The police discovered blood near the back door of the apartment and on the stairs leading to the street. As Jason and Joanie had exited through the front door, detectives believed the killer likely escaped through the back door in Jason's room. Another clue was found, a partial footprint possibly left by the attacker when they followed Jason and attacked him. The brutal nature of Joanie's murder led police to suspect a personal motive. Initial investigations focused on Joanie's boyfriend, despite him being approximately 1,000 kilometers away from Knoxville. However, friends and family testified to their wonderful relationship, and he had no apparent reason to commit such a heinous crime. He learned of Joanie's death when her mother called him at 10 a.m. and claimed to have fainted and taken a long time to recover. In his incapacitated state, he required a neighbor's assistance to book a plane ticket and pack his suitcase. After carefully verifying his alibi, investigators concluded he couldn't have physically traveled to Knoxville and back by morning, thus ruling him out as a suspect and shifting their attention to Joani's neighbor. In contrast to Joani's boyfriend, who had a solid alibi, this particular neighbor did not, which raised suspicions that he might be the perpetrator. Many friends and family members of Joanie suspected him, with some believing he could be the killer, and others accusing him of leaving Joanie behind as he fled the apartment. The suspicion was so deep-seated that Joani's parents didn't even want him to attend her funeral. After Jason was released from the hospital, investigators started questioning him. He maintained his original story, stating that he had heard screams, seen an unfamiliar man, and was attacked after successfully fighting off the attacker. Jason rushed to the front door, went out into the street, and sought help from the neighbors. He thought Joanie had also escaped from the apartment because he could no longer hear her screams. However, the police had doubts about the truth of this testimony. Doubts about Jason initially stemmed from his injuries. Although he had 8 wounds, 7 was superficial, and the 8th on his right arm could have been sustained while either defending himself or attacking someone. Furthermore, the absence of forced entry into the apartment suggested that the assailant might have already been inside. Jason claimed to have taken out the trash through the back door that night, but he couldn't recall whether he had locked it. The detectives pressed him further, focusing on which door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason maintained that he had left through the front door, but the police he was lying. If Jason had actually exited through the back door, it would account for the bloodstains near the door leading to the stairs, thereby heightening suspicions against him. Additionally, the police accused him of using and selling illegal drugs and of becoming aggressive when he couldn't get his fix. Jason denied all these allegations, but the investigators continued to level various charges against him. After spending several hours at the police station, the detectives asked Jason to take a polygraph test, and to their surprise, he accepted. An expert was brought in to administer the test, during which Jason was asked a series of leading questions. When the test was over, the investigators told him that he had failed, suggesting that his responses were false. This news caused Jason to become extremely upset, shouting that he was innocent and had no involvement in the crime, that his life was in danger, and that the real perpetrator was still at large. Despite his protests, the detectives remained skeptical. Police couldn't charge Jason due to lack of evidence. Lab analysis of the murder weapon revealed 3 DNA samples: the victim's, Jason's, and an unknown man's. The unknown DNA was also found elsewhere in the apartment. A bloody fingerprint on the knife handle didn't match Jason's. These findings suggested another person was present, but the unknown DNA didn't match any in the database. Despite this, public opinion still doubted Jason's innocence. Jason developed PTSD after a flawed polygraph test led to false accusations. In reality, Jason had severe lung and neck injuries with little hope of recovery. However, due to police report inaccuracies, His treatment was only 25% covered, leaving him in financial distress. After the police stopped suspecting him, they started questioning Jason as a witness. Based on his account, they managed to create a rough description of the attacker. However, the situation was complicated by the fact that Jason didn't get a clear look at the assailant's face. The apartment was dimly lit, and the attacker had pounced on him as soon as he left the room. In Joania's room, the investigators made an intriguing discovery. A cap was found near the back staircase along with discs and a stereo player. At first, they thought these items might belong to Joanie or Jason, but Jason denied any connection to them, claiming they were not in his apartment. This led the investigators to suspect that the killer might have left them behind. The police released a rough sketch of the suspect to the media, and after it was published, they received hundreds of leads. Many people reported individuals who vaguely matched the sketch, prompting the detectives to investigate each of these leads. One lead in particular caught their attention: a group of local teenagers known to break into houses to steal. One of these teenagers, 19-year-old Michael, bore a resemblance to the suspect sketch. The police launched a search for Michael, which was made more complicated by the fact that he was already wanted for theft. With the possibility of his involvement in murder, 2 police units joined the search for Michael. They tracked down Michael and brought him in for questioning about the murder. As soon as he was in custody, the investigators turned their attention to his shoes, which had a tread pattern that was similar to the footprint found at the crime scene. They took DNA and fingerprint samples from Michael and sent them to the lab for analysis. While waiting for the results, they questioned him, and he made a surprising confession. Michael claimed that he and a friend had broken into Gia's apartment that night, intending to steal valuables. However, he said his friend had taken a knife and attacked Gia, but the detectives soon grew suspicious of Michael's story. The details he provided didn't match the evidence they had collected, and there was no sign of 2 strangers at the crime scene. The lab results only added to their doubts. Michael's DNA and fingerprints didn't match those found at the murder scene, and his shoes didn't match the tread pattern found in Gia's room. In the end, the police concluded that Michael had made up the whole story. It may seem strange, but it's not uncommon for people to falsely confess to high-profile crimes, often to get attention or a reward. It's unclear what motivated Michael, but his confession turned out to be completely false. Following the murder, investigators questioned over 1,000 potential suspects and collected around 400 DNA samples. However, none of them matched the evidence found at the crime scene. In an effort to encourage people to come forward with information, a reward was offered early on in the investigation. As time went on, the reward amount increased each month. By December 2005, a year after the murder, the reward had reached $60,000. The state governor also contributed an additional $20,000 from his own funds, drawing even more public attention to the case. Despite the many leads, all of them ultimately led to dead ends. As a result, the case remained unsolved for several years. In February 2007, the victim's parents took action seeking changes in state legislation. They found it surprising that the murderer's fingerprints and DNA were not in any databases, considering the brutality of the crime. The parents refused to believe that this was the perpetrator's first offense. They later discovered that according to Tennessee laws, fingerprints and DNA samples were only collected from people who had been convicted of a crime. Jason's parents were determined to bring about change. They took an active role in shaping a new law that required the collection of DNA samples from all individuals arrested for violent crimes. The authorities backed this initiative, and the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case. The police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olson for violating his probation terms. Olson had a lengthy criminal record, mainly involving theft, check forgery, and auto theft with multiple previous arrests. Remarkably, despite his history of run-ins with the law, his fingerprints and DNA had never been collected. Olson lived with his girlfriend and their newborn daughter, but his criminal activities persisted. It was revealed that Olson had already come to the investigators' attention 5 months earlier when they received a tip about his possible involvement in the murder. However, for reasons unknown, the police had not pursued DNA samples for analysis at that time. Nevertheless, With his new arrest for probation violation, they finally decided to question him about Joania's case. Olson eventually confessed his involvement in the murder and willingly provided the DNA sample. When the lab results came in, it was confirmed that Taylor's DNA was a complete match with the sample found in the victim's apartment. Following this, they collected his fingerprints, which also matched the fingerprint on the murder weapon. Olson was subsequently arrested, and detectives began to question him. Initially, Olson said he was not guilty, but he eventually decided to confess to his actions. Taylor claimed that on that night, he had intended to steal Joanie's car and had entered her apartment through the back door to find the car keys. When he entered her room, she woke up and began screaming. In response, Olson grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her multiple times. However, he insisted that he hadn't intended to kill anyone and that it had all occurred accidentally. Detectives had doubts about the truthfulness of some details and leaned towards believing that Taylor had premeditated the murder. It was possible that he had been stalking the victim for some time, indirectly supported by the fact that Joania's friends had reported someone following her in a car at the time. No evidence was found to substantiate this, but after Olson's arrest, it seemed increasingly plausible. Despite this, there was little doubt about his culpability, as his DNA and fingerprints were present on the murder weapon, strongly indicating his involvement. Olson's trial was slated to commence in mid-2008, and by that point, he had already retained a lawyer. Apparently, his legal counsel advised him to retract his confession, and Taylor presented a new version of events to the detectives. Now he claimed that he had entered Joanie's apartment with his friend named Noah Cox. According to this revised account, when Olson entered Gia's room to retrieve the car keys, she allegedly woke up, seized a knife, and stabbed him several times. Olson then fled through the back door while his friend entered Gia's room, disarmed her, and killed her. This new narrative raised suspicions among the police as they found no fingerprints or DNA from other individuals at the crime scene, making it appear unlikely that anyone else was involved. Detectives awaited the start of the trial, but it never occurred. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olson took his own life in his prison cell. Alongside him, several suicide notes were discovered, addressed to his family, Joan, his relatives, and the police. In the note to the detectives, he once again alleged that his friend Noah Cox was the actual perpetrator and also apologized to Gia's family and his own. Detectives continued to believe that Olson was responsible for the murder and repeatedly questioned him, but they found no evidence implicating him. Gia's parents also remained skeptical, believing that Olson was lying. In their view, if Taylor was truly innocent, he wouldn't have taken his own life. It seemed more likely that he simply did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison. Furthermore, for several months following his initial confession, Olson had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone and that there was no one else with him. The sudden change in his story to shift blame onto his friend raised further doubts. The case of Patrick Dea. In February 2018, the quiet town of Deltona, situated in eastern Florida near the Atlantic coast, faced a shocking incident: the brutal murder of a young man named Patrick Dea. The 25-year-old man was found dead his home. His injuries suggested a deeply personal motive behind the attack. The Patrick Dea case is emblematic of a meticulously planned crime that nearly went unsolved. Although the suspect was identified almost immediately, no direct evidence was available to confirm his guilt. Patrick Dea was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a picturesque metropolitan area. Patrick grew up under the care of his father Max Dea, originally from Spain, and his mother Patricia Ranza, born in France but relocated to the United States in the 80s. They married soon after and started their family. The Dea family was known for being close-knit and happy. Patrick grew up surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. A kind, intelligent, and sociable young man, he did well academically and could easily become the center of any social gathering. From childhood, he had a strong bond with his parents, who spared no effort or expense to ensure he received a good education and developed into an upstanding individual. Max Dea worked in construction and was highly regarded in his field. Although not wealthy by big city standards, the family lived comfortably. After graduating high school, Patrick chose to study construction in university, aiming to follow in his father's footsteps. While Patrick attended university, his parents decided to divorce after nearly 25 years together. Remarkably, they separated amicably without any scandals or disputes over property. His mother moved to Deltona, a quiet town on Florida's East Coast, where she soon remarried. Despite their separation, all family members remained close and maintained friendly relations. Patrick stayed with his father in Miami. They worked together and were respected professionals within the construction industry despite their personal circumstances. They kept in regular contact, frequently calling and communicating. They were always ready to assist when necessary. Patrick often his mother in Deltona, sharing updates about his life, his joys, and experiences. He delighted in telling her about meeting the girl of his dreams. Thanks to his French-Spanish heritage, Patrick had an eye-catching appearance from a young age. He was quite popular with the opposite sex, but he valued the example set by his family. Consequently, Patrick did not pursue frivolous relationships. He yearned for a meaningful connection and a strong family of his own. Patrick created an account there based on a friend's recommendation and wasn't entirely convinced it would help him find his soulmate. One evening in June 2017, while browsing through profiles without much optimism, a photo caught his eye. A captivating brunette with mesmerizing eyes and an enchanting smile. Intrigued, Patrick decided to message her. The lady in the photo was Jessica Devaney, born in 1988, in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university, where she studied banking, before securing a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Jessica was immediately drawn to Patrick's profile as well. They exchanged messages on the website for several days before deciding to swap phone numbers. Over the next few weeks, they spoke every evening for hours, discussing various topics and forming a deep mutual sympathy and trust. Realizing their connection was genuine, they decided to meet in person, despite living in different parts of the state. They chose a location that was roughly halfway between them for their first date. On their first date, Patrick realized that Jessica was the girl he'd been searching for all along, and whom he no longer wanted to let go. She also liked him immediately, though Jessica was slightly confused by the age difference, as she was 4 years older than Patrick. On his way home, Patrick called his mother to share that he had met the girl of his dreams whom he wished to marry and start a family with. Patricia heard the joy and excitement in her son's voice, recognized his seriousness, and felt happy for him. Their long-distance relationship lasted several months, presenting challenges because the couple could only see each other on weekends. They usually met somewhere neutral, renting a hotel room in a cozy, secluded place to enjoy each other's company. However, by Sunday night, they parted ways since they needed to return to work on Monday morning. In December 2017, Patrick moved to Delton, where his mother lived, to be closer to Jessica. He bought a house in a quiet neighborhood and began renovations to create a cozy nest for Jessica's eventual move. But Jessica couldn't leave her job immediately. Thus, they planned a housewarming party for early spring the next year. On New Year's Eve, which the couple celebrated together, Patrick prepared a surprise for Jessica. He arranged fireworks in the backyard of the house, and as she admired them, he got down on one knee and held out a box with a ring. He then asked her the most important question, whether she would become his lawful wife. Jessica felt incredibly happy and of course agreed. Patrick later admitted he'd spent considerable time searching for an engagement ring, but hadn't found one perfect enough in any jewelry store. To make sure he could propose before the new year, he chose the best available option, but ordered an exclusive ring from a jewelry workshop. An original piece designed by himself. 2 months had passed since the engagement. Preparations for both the wedding and the upcoming housewarming were in full swing. The couple's choice of events had received their parents' approval, and they themselves were unspeakably happy, readying for a new stage in their lives. The young couple planned an extravagant celebration, either on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean in Miami or in France, where the groom's mother originated from. On February 27, 2018, Max Diera, Patrick's father, received a call from a courier. Max's number was listed as an additional contact. The courier reported that Patrick's order had been delivered to the specified address. However, no one opened the door or answered the phone. This was highly unusual for Patrick, prompting concern from his father as he was occupied at work and couldn't leave to pick up the order or check on his son. Max decided to contact Jessica, his future daughter-in-law. Max called Jessica with anxiety in his voice, expressing that he couldn't reach Patrick. Jessica herself had been trying to get in touch with her fiancé since morning, but had not received any replies or calls back. Upon hearing this, Max stated that something must have happened to Patrick. Alarmed by this suggestion, Jessica dropped everything she was doing and headed toward Patrick's house as quickly as she could. Upon arriving at Patrick's house, she immediately noticed his car parked in the driveway, indicating he hadn't left home. Armed with her own key, Jessica entered the yard and called out repeatedly for her fiancé, but got no response. She cautiously opened the front door, only to be confronted by a horrifying sight. Her fiancé lay motionless near the entrance, in a pool of blood. Jessica promptly called emergency services. However, paramedics who arrived on scene were unable to assist Patrick and could only declare him dead upon arrival. By the time police officers reached Patrick's residence, a heartbroken Jessica was found sobbing uncontrollably in the backyard, the very place where Patrick had proposed 2 months earlier. One of the attending officers approached her gently and began their inquiries into this tragic event. She only glanced at him and remarked that she knew who had decimated her lover and upended her existence, a wealthy and influential ex-boyfriend. To comprehend this perplexing case, and to decipher who might want to kill a young man, who at first glance seemed to have neither adversaries nor ill wishes, it is necessary to rewind a bit to when he and Jessica initially crossed paths. At that time, Jessica was entangled in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a prosperous businessman, managing his own investment fund. Jessica encountered Gregory during her college years. He was 20 years her senior and quickly mesmerized the young woman. The businessman courted her lavishly, offering extravagant gifts and taking her to upscale resorts. Jessica believed she had discovered true love. However, soon she started noticing peculiarities in his demeanor. Gregory sought to dominate every aspect of her life, vigilantly tracking where she went and whom she associated with. Their relationship persisted for almost 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. Their interactions were strictly on his terms, meeting or going on vacations, only at his convenience. Rarely did he invite her over to his residence. Jessica craved a conventional family life and children. Each time she raised the subject, Bender dismissed the idea as untimely. When she attempted to end the relationship, Gregory proposed with a ring. Jessica accepted the proposal, but nothing changed. They still lived separately, only met when he needed. One day, Gregory was involved in an automobile accident that left him hospitalized. Upon hearing this news, Jessica hurried to see him, but first decided to stop by his house for some essential items for Gregory. There, Jessica encountered an unfamiliar woman and inquired about her identity. Instead of responding directly, the woman asked a similar question back. Jessica displayed the engagement ring on her finger and announced that she was the fiancée of the house's owner. In response, the woman laughed and exhibited her own ring, proclaiming herself as Bender's legal wife, Diora Sanchez Bender. Shattered by this revelation, Jessica resolved immediately to end all ties with the businessman who had deceived her for so many years. The boyfriend began to actively pursue Jessica, begging her to return and promising that he would divorce Damora in the near future so they could get married. Jessica believed him once more. However, time passed and nothing about their relationship changed. Eventually, tired of the lack of progress, Jessica filled out a questionnaire on a dating site, where she soon met Patrick. After starting to communicate with Patrick, she firmly decided to break up with Gregory and informed him of her decision. Unfortunately, Gregory did not want to let her go. He became an obsessive stalker. Initially, Bender simply persuaded Jessica to come back and try again, promising once more to divorce his wife. When persuasion failed, he moved on to threats and harassment. Realizing these tactics were ineffective, Gregory decided to find out more about his rival, Patrick, about whom he knew nothing at the time. Gregory turned to professionals who hacked into Jessica's account to uncover who she was communicating with. After discovering Patrick's identity and obtaining his contact information, Gregory began sending threatening messages, demanding that Patrick break up with Jessica and referring to her as his fiancée. Patrick remained calm and unreactive to the threats, believing they would not escalate beyond verbal harassment. However, Jessica was frightened because she understood that her ex-boyfriend was capable of anything. He was a man with substantial financial resources and connections and owned a large collection of firearms. Jessica proposed breaking up with Patrick before anyone got hurt, but Patrick refused even to consider it. Consequently, they decided it was time to involve the police by providing evidence that Bender was stalking and threatening them. The couple succeeded in obtaining a restraining order against Gregory, while also requiring him to surrender all firearms stored in his home. Things calmed down for a while after this legal action. The lovers began thinking that the stalker had finally left them alone. Jessica persuaded Patrick that it was crucial to install CCTV cameras around and inside the house because she feared Gregory might violate the ban. On February 27, 2018, during the initial examination of the crime scene, criminalists immediately ruled out robbery. They noted that by the nature of the mutilation, this murder had a personal motive and that the perpetrator clearly hated his victim. The body of a 25-year-old man revealed 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. Additionally, experts identified injuries and bruises consistent with a fall from a ladder. The body was found lying on the floor between the front door and the stairs, leading to the second floor. Investigators speculated that the killer had most likely snuck into the house and waited on the second floor. When an unsuspecting Patrick entered and climbed the stairs, he was met by his assailant. The intruder fired a bullet into Patrick's thigh, causing him to roll down the stairs. Following him down, the perpetrator fired another shot into his chest before finishing him off with 2 shots to the head. Although no murder weapon was recovered, it was determined to be a rare model of pistol that is not easy to obtain. The first shell casing was found on the second floor of the house. 2 more were found downstairs. However, a 4th shell casing was missing. Despite Jessica's statements about knowing who killed her fiancé, initial suspicion fell on Patrick's neighbor. They had a serious conflict some months prior. This neighbor was a U.S. Army veteran with combat experience who had developed a mental disorder due to severe injuries and concussions sustained during service. In December 2017, just months before, this veteran mistook his new neighbor for an intruder and opened fire, thankfully missing, but ended up hospitalized in a psychiatric facility due to an exacerbation of his condition. He was adept with firearms and could easily acquire rare gun models. This background made him a prime suspect in Patrick's murder, despite Jessica's accusations pointing elsewhere. Once he returned home, Patrick found himself constantly followed. A neighbor, who struggled with mental illness, was particularly suspicious of Patrick, calling him a spy and vowing to expose him. This neighbor's unhealthy imagination could indeed be a potential motive. Consequently, the authorities detained and interrogated him. The neighbor openly expressed his strong dislike for Patrick but maintained a solid alibi at the time of the murder. Several eyewitnesses confirmed this alibi. Because these recordings were gone, it was impossible to determine who entered or exited the residence on that day. Adding to the challenge, no physical evidence was found at the crime scene. No fingerprints, shoe prints, or DNA traces. It became clear that the murder was meticulously planned. Despite their suspicions surrounding Gregory, it appeared as though he might evade justice for now. The police decided on a covert approach and asked Jessica to engage her former lover in an earnest conversation. She agreed without hesitation. Jessica called Gregory and dramatically blamed him for all that had happened. She wept and repeatedly questioned why he did it. Yet Gregory seemed to anticipate the investigators' intentions from the outset. He pretended not to understand what she meant. When Jessica accused him directly of killing her fiancé, Gregory feigned shock and offered condolences. Attempting to provoke a confession or trick him into making a mistake proved fruitless. Lacking concrete reasons to detain or further question him, Police could only summon Gregory for testimony when required by law. He complied with restraining orders and appeared to have moved on from his ex-girlfriend long ago. While detectives struggled to find leads, a breakthrough came when Duara Sanchez Bender contacted them with crucial information about Patrick Dea's case. She was promptly invited for an interview at the station, where she revealed significant details occurring shortly before the crime transpired. She discovered a peculiar notebook concerning her husband's death in his office. Upon examining it, Deora found a detailed layout of an unfamiliar house and next to it, a peculiar series of procedural steps. Initially, she did not pay much attention to it. However, when Deora News report detailing the brutal murder of a young man and the story displayed the plan of his house, she immediately recalled the drawings she had seen by her unfaithful husband, with whom she was nearing divorce. She decided to inform the investigators. This information provided the police with sufficient grounds to search the house of the alleged perpetrator. They found the mysterious notebook that the businessman's wife had mentioned in his office. Although the pages containing the house's plan and additional records were missing, they were soon located in a trash can within the office. Gregory had apparently attempted, but forgotten, to dispose of them properly. He had merely torn out the pages, crumpled them, and discarded them in the trash bin. Apparently, he was confident that no search would be conducted on his house as there was no incriminating evidence against him. On these pieces of paper, aside from the house's layout, there was an elaborate outline of the crime itself. It became evident that the perpetrator had meticulously planned every aspect over a prolonged period. The document mentioned specific actions like disabling his phone, wearing gloves, and applying a special substance to shoe soles to avoid leaving footprints on floors. From these records, it was clear that Gregory had tracked his victim. He knew Patrick's return schedule and was aware of surveillance cameras present inside and around Patrick's home. Additionally, Gregory ensured that he disposed of all incriminating items, such as weapons used in the crime and soiled clothes, shoes, and gloves. His downfall stemmed from his own records not being destroyed in time and his wife's curiosity. Furthermore, police discovered a fourth missing shell casing on Gregory's table inside a cigar box, evidently intended as some macabre trophy by Gregory. Forensics confirmed this casing matched those from the crime scene. The defense attorneys tried shifting blame towards Jessica during trial preparations. However, there was enough concrete evidence pointing towards Gregory for him to be arrested and brought forth for trial proceedings. The primary challenge then lay within considering all evidence collected deemed circumstantial, since neither murder weapon nor direct proof linked him physically at victim's residence. Along with no witnessing testimonies, raised complexities. Ultimately, proceedings began against Bender. However, challenges remained in proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. This was due to the circumstantial nature of the evidence. Crucial links were unbridgeable, making it difficult to reach absolute conclusiveness essential. Until May 2021, more than 3 years after he sought the best lawyers who had ample time to prepare for the case thoroughly. Despite this, the businessman remained optimistic, appearing to believe he would escape accountability. Jessica was a pivotal witness. She detailed her long-standing relationship with Gregory, describing how she discovered he was married and tried to end their involvement. She also shared instances of harassment and threats against her and Patrick. Jessica provided crucial evidence, including saved screenshots of correspondence and phone records. In response, Bender's attorneys attempted to shift all blame onto Jessica. The defense argued that Jessica herself provoked Gregory with her actions, registering on a dating site and starting a new relationship before ending things with Gregory. They claimed this behavior wounded his pride and ego. Furthermore, Jessica was accused of mercantilism, highlighting her fondness for receiving expensive gifts from a wealthy suitor. During one session, Dora Sanchez, the defendant's now ex-wife, was called as a witness. The previously indifferent defendant became animated and unexpectedly professed his love for her. Moved by this confession, Sanchez seemingly reconsidered her stance on testifying against Gregory. She got confused during her testimony, citing forgetfulness. Eventually, she mentioned that she had lived with the man for many years and doubted he was capable of murder. Defense attorneys tried to challenge the legality of the search of defendant's home. Despite his ex-wife's unexpected statement and the lack of direct evidence, the jury still found Gregory Bender guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the judge read the sentence, Bender stared at Jessica intently without blinking. His glare really made her feel sick, and she almost had a panic attack. Sitting next to her late fiancé's mother, Jessica began sobbing and choking. Despite many attempts by Bender and his well-paid lawyers to appeal and get the case reviewed, all appeals were rejected. The widespread attention this case received in society played no small part in this outcome, since a wealthy millionaire businessman had cold-bloodedly murdered a simple working man and tried to get away with it. The story of Patrick Dea was widely covered in the press. As Gregory Bender remains behind bars, Jessica Devaney says she feels safe. She continues to live in Patrick's memory, wearing the ring he gave her as a gift, and another piece of jewelry that he never got around to giving her. Jessica maintains a close relationship with her deceased fiancé's parents, who treat her like their own daughter. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.